All right, everyone, I am going to get started because I believe in starting on time. Thank you so much for joining us for today's 1U Digital Training. As we've been doing these trainings, we've been so excited and overwhelmed by the response that we've had. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. We've had some great trainers, but this is my first 1U Digital Training, and I'm really excited to get started. So today I'm going to talk about online to offline organizing, which is actually the worst possible name for this presentation. I can't think of a worse name to give you this presentation. I'll talk about why that's true as we go on, but that's sort of today's topic. And just in case this is your first 1U training, and we've had some questions about this, so we clarified at the beginning of every training, what is hashtag 1U? It's the hashtag for anything union-related on Twitter. You know, the AFL-CIO with its affiliates, the state feds, CLCs, and the locals has one of the biggest online and social media programs. We've done a great job getting started, but digital changes fast, and it's important to keep updated on the trainings and best practices so that our work can stay really at the cutting edge. And in order for that to happen, we have to continually train our leaders. The unions are one of the best folks at doing professional development and training, and that extends to our communications work. So that's why we're doing this training series and why we're so excited that the response has been so great. There really is something for everyone in the beginner classes, in the intermediate classes, and the advanced classes. You'll learn new skills and new ideas. So I highly encourage you to go back to those beginner trainings if you haven't taken them yet. And we're calling this hashtag 1U because it's the hashtag for union conversations on Twitter. There's already a conversation happening online about unions, and we want every member of the labor union to be a part of it so that we're really one union. And who am I? I'm Jess Morales. I'm the Senior Digital Strategist here at the AFL-CIO. Just to give you a little bit more about me, I'm a fourth-generation Mexican-American. I grew up in Southern California in a big Mexican family. But as you can see, I'm pretty light-skinned. I don't speak Spanish fluently. And part of that is because my family's been here a really long time. We are the folks who have been started having some technical difficulties. Okay, great. Now we're up. All right, let me start over again. Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a fourth-generation Mexican-American. I grew up in Southern California, and I look a little bit different, I think, than most people expect Mexican-Americans do. Part of that is because my family's been here for forever. We grew up in Los Angeles and Gallup, New Mexico, and El Paso, Texas. A lot of places, if you know, are close to the borders. So basically, my family has always been in the same places, and they used to be Mexico, and then the border moved, and then they were America. So my family's been here a really long time, but my story is like a lot of Mexican-American stories. It's an immigrant story. My grandfather was an American citizen, but was deported in the 20s under something called Operation Wetback, which was a program to get Mexican-Americans out of the United States, so because they were taking away jobs from quote-unquote real Americans. And I feel the legacy of coming here and wanting to work hard and wanting a fair shot at being able to work hard, like I think a lot of immigrant descendants do. So for me, working for the unions is part of that story of my family's American story of working really hard, of moving to work and picking up and doing something different, and also of being ready to be able to have a fair shot on the job, to be able to collect the wages that you're owed and speak the language that you want, and be recognized for the value that you have rather than who you are or where you happen to be born. So it's an honor and a privilege to work for the union movement, and I'm continually impressed by folks here every single day, and particularly because I feel like the work that we do on the digital team is part of kind of building a new legacy in the labor movement. And this idea talking about integrated organizing and online to offline organizing is something that to me feels like our new path forward. When we think about what happens to the labor movement in the next 100 years, I think that online is at the center of that, and particularly about how we integrate our long-standing field structures with these new online tools. So today we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about this concept of integrated organizing and what I call the 3 pillars of integrated organizing. I'm going to detail what a campaign that is integrated looks like. And then for fun, everyone's going to participate in sort of a role play that allows us to talk about how we're going to make those decisions. I call that choose your own campaign adventure. So I think probably the last part of this training is going to be the best part. So make sure you stay on all the way through. Let's talk about integrated organizing. So people like to talk about offline organizing. That's traditional field organizing. I really reject the term offline organizing. I try never to use it. 85% of Americans are online now. So when we're talking about offline organizing, then maybe we would only be talking about organizing that small percentage of Americans that aren't online. I talk about on-the-ground organizing. I think that's a better representation of the kind of work that we do. But people also want to talk about online organizing. There's no such thing as that either. I don't know anyone who's ever been moved just from sitting behind a computer screen. At the end of the day, there's no substitute for talking face-to-face. And over again in our tests around phone calls and emails, what we found is that when people talk face-to-face, when you look someone in the eye and ask them to be behind you, that's when they say yes. So I don't think there's such thing as online organizing. I think there's just organizing. I think online organizing is something people said because they wanted to try to understand what sort of this new media was. But now it's not that new anymore. It's been around for a while, and I think it will only continue to remain really prevalent. And so I think you're going to see these distinctions about online or on the ground or offline organizing melt away and just be left with organizing. It's how everyone will interact with our supporters and our members on campaigns where we're trying to win, and we'll just be organizing. But the tools that we'll be using to do that will be a little bit different. So I want to talk a little bit about what organizing looks like right now in some shops. Maybe it's at your local or your affiliate or at our affiliates, or even maybe sometimes here at the AFL-CIO. So sometimes it's like this, maybe in your department or your office, and there's political and campaigns. They take up all the resources. They have the most decision-making power, and the most time and energy is put into political and campaigns. And maybe a tiny bit, is given to media and comms. They also have a big role, but it's mostly just those two things. They take up everything, and more importantly, they have all the decision-making power. Or perhaps your shop is like this. Political and campaign still gets a lot of effort, but you're also thinking a lot about membership and organizing and how we get new members and what to do. And you'll be able to, and they also get a lot of resources. And then maybe also, again, some media and comm stuff to help sort of amplify the efforts that the political and campaigns and the members and organizing have. Or maybe your shop looks like this. A lot of media and communications. You push out a lot of press releases. Maybe even you have a pretty great online game already. And then some political and campaigns organizing. Those press releases are often amplifying statements from your labor leaders or whoever is in charge. And then occasionally you're also getting folks to knock on doors or call their senator when a big bill is in the state legislature. Or maybe even it looks like this. Maybe mostly everybody's equal, political, media, members, digital. Maybe those things are equal. But media and membership and organizing and political and campaigns all work together. And then digital is kind of off on its own, doing its own thing. It may not even really be that integrated. And maybe you don't call it some of the words that I called it. Maybe you call it your field team or something else. But I think probably if we go back through here and look at these models for how folks have sort of allocated their shops and their resources, and also how they've made their decision-making structure and who has the power to make decisions with organizations, they fall pretty clearly into some of these camps. But actually, those are less than ideal. It's less than ideal for doing our digital work, certainly, and it's also just less than ideal in terms of thinking about our larger power as an organization and as individuals. You want to be more like this. You'll notice here that everything's roughly the same size, and it also all touches each other. In a shop, this is a really integrated shop. It's the kind of department or organization where people share information, where everyone works together so that they aren't competing for time or resources, and where all of those efforts are amplified and supplemented by one another. And maybe after seeing that, maybe that's a little bit too much real truth for you, some hard talks, and you're thinking, like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. But I think this is a really important way for frame for our discussion about how we move forward into having real integrated campaigns and integrated departments. So let's talk about how we do that. The first way, I think, is through the 3 pillars. It doesn't matter what kind of campaign you're doing, what kind of trade you are, what union you are, or even if you're not a union, you're a community organization or affiliate, you can follow these 3 pillars. They're at the center of all the work that we do. It's story, community, and action. When you have those 3 things as the anchors for our work and our campaigns, you'll find that the other things can fall into place because you can allow that to help you make decisions. So regardless of what kind of organizing you do or what tradition of organizing that you come out of, many people conceptualize their work in sort of this way. We're trying to always make new people be leaders and new folks get in, and how do we do that? We want to move them through the stages of leadership. They start out angry. Maybe they saw something on Fox News and it made them want to throw the remote at the television. And then they started Googling to see what they could do about that because they just don't want to let insert bad person get away with that. And they see that there is effort against that. That leads them into hope. They know that there's an ability for them to be a part of the change that they're hoping for, and they think that it's possible that they could win against this bad person that they don't like. And then we want to move them into action. At the end of the day, we don't just want people to sit behind their computer screens. We need people to sort of put their boots on the ground, so to speak. And so we want to move them into action. That action might be online action. It might be sending an email or tweeting in the senator, but it might also be offline or on-the-ground action. It might be canvassing or rallying outside an office or doing a congressional lobby day. But either way, it motivates them to go somewhere. And once we have them in that action phase, we can ask people to do a lot of different things. We're really good at that. We perfected being able to keep and get volunteers and members. So when we think about how we apply that anger, hope, and action, we can think about those also sort of being mirrored by our 3 pillars of story, community, and action. So I think that that anger portion is often when we tell our story. And it might not be, you could substitute anger for another emotion. It might be frustration or even powerlessness. And it's a way to generate emotion. So a lot of times I see folks in the larger progressive movement and also in our labor family trying to spout off a lot of statistics or talk about really like narrow policy, wonky stuff. But the way that people have always been motivated and moved is through emotion, through telling their authentic, unique stories, and then also by saying that they want to be part of the solution and how they're addressing that problem and what that solution is. And those experiences are really universal experiences. It's why I started this training by talking about my family's immigrant story, because I know a lot of other families also have an immigrant story. So even if you're not a 4th-generation Mexican-American or from Gallup, New Mexico, or Southern California, or El Paso, Texas, you can find sort of parallels in sort of our universal experiences together. That creates connections and emotion through one another. And it also answers some really key questions. Who am I? Who are we? Who are we fighting for? Who are we against, which can be very important. It asks what we're fighting for and what our impact is. And then it also, and this is really critical, it answers the question of how will we change things if we win, and what are we going to do to win? Because ultimately we're in sort of this social change organizing because we want to make things different. So if we're just talking, and not actually moving people into doing something that is meaningful, they'll see through that right away. Especially union folks, because our bullshit barometer is high. And then we want to talk about community. Ultimately, those universal experiences and those common threads that we're trying to build are because we want all of us to feel like we're together. And I think more than any other sort of piece of the progressive sphere, union folks really understand that. We're made to be collective bargaining and to be able to stand together in solidarity. Those kinds of words, I think, are really helpful to us when we think about building community, because it allows us to be motivated with intention. It allows us to say, the reason that we're trying to do this is because we want to create some sort of specific change. And we have to ask ourselves, how can we have trust and commitment together? And this is really increasingly important in sort of this age of constant communication, even when you're not in the same room. We have to think about how we can stay connected when we're apart. You can't always have people in for a meeting every night. And so I think online sort of becomes the bridge between those things, that people can still feel really connected to the other members and their work when we integrate that online piece. And then we think about how we have fun. I think this is really important. A lot of times, when we're asking people to do things, we're asking them to, like, knock on doors or call on a phone, and those things are like, frankly, not that fun. But when we're asking them to do things like knock on doors but first come to our barbecue, or call on the phone and we'll have coloring books for the kids and other things like that, when we think about creatively how we want to get people and continue to create family, sort of like that familiar atmosphere, then I think that we can create community together. And we also think about creating action. So ultimately, we don't just want to bring these people in for no reason. We want to win things. We have campaigns, and we want to give people meaningful action. That's really important. People are going to see through right away if you're asking them to do things that don't matter, or if you ask them to do things over and over again that aren't strategic, and so the change that we are promising never happens. We want to make sure that we're continuing to give people new skills so that they can train and grow, and that might be personally or as a group. That's the kind of thing that keeps them coming back for more and makes them feel like you're really invested in them as a person. And then we also want to have an impact. And so we want to win, and if we're not thinking strategically about how to integrate all those pieces together, we're not going to. So let's talk about sort of that strategic piece. What's an integrated campaign look like? And they have this little picture of the Mary Poppins tape measure, if you've ever seen it. She, when she goes into her new home where she has her charges, she measures each of the little kids that she's looking after, and she gives them the tape measure sort of measures their worth. Who they are is their personality. So maybe they're a little surly, or they have a little bit of an attitude. And then she measures herself, and she is practically perfect in every way. And I think it's a good motto for us to strive for. We certainly can't be right every time, but we can definitely try. So let's talk about that. Step one is you got to set your goals. So field, campaigns, political organizing, whatever you call it in your shop, that team defines the goals. They set their field plan, they define the scope of their budget, and they determine who will execute the campaign. Note that I say their goals and their budget. I've seen in a lot of places, folks will try to set the campaign budget for the digital team without consulting the digital team or the communications team or the communications person. They will define the goals for that person as well, and they'll say, we want X number of Facebook impressions. And any good digital person with their salt knows that Facebook impressions may not be a good measure of whether or not their campaign is having an impact online. And they'll say, we want this person from that department to do this work, which again sort of ignores the fact that digital folks know how to do their work and do their work in the most strategic way possible, and make sure that it fits into sort of a broader narrative of their larger campaign goals as a department. And that's really important because communications, people who do communications full-time, or if you're, one of a bunch of people who are doing communications, or even if you're a field person who also does some communications work in your job, you want to make sure that you're consulting with the people in your organization who also are going to be able to make those decisions with you. Ultimately, you're hiring people because they're experts, and they know what they're here for. So you want to make sure to respect them by asking them and letting them make decisions about the work that they're going to do. Not only will they be more invested in that work, but you'll probably just have better work. So then you want to define your actions. What kind of action are we going to do? Is it a scalable action? Is it a high bar? And those scalable actions could be things like lobby days or voter registration, maybe community service or petition deliveries, something that can happen all across the state regardless of location. Maybe it's high bar stuff, things like direct action or civil disobedience. Maybe you want to say we want to build X number of teams. You're going to have to recruit a lot of members or volunteers. Or maybe it's an ongoing action like a strike or a weekly meeting you want people to attend, or phone banks every day, or whatever. You want to make sure that that action is answering both what our problem is and here's something you can do to change that problem. And you want there to be a real theory of change in that action. So a theory of change answers the question of, by doing this action now, this is how we will change things. And one thing that I see a lot from folks is what they'll say is this is the feature they want to put online in, and they'll say, well, can you email this statement out to our email list, or can you put this white paper on Facebook and make sure folks know about it? That is not a substitute for the on-the-ground engagement that has to be echoed in your actions. So you want to make sure that your actions have both online and on-the-ground components, and that those things are working together. That's pretty important. When you plug in that digital, you want to make sure it works with your field plan, not separately. So if you're a field person or a field team and you've planned the entire action and you calendared it all out and you've recruited people and you've defined your goals, but you haven't talked to whoever does digital or communications in your shop, they're working separately. You want those people to sit at the table together and make a plan. And I'm not saying that a field team or that a digital team should say what the field team should do. Not at all. What I'm saying is that when a field team has an idea, a digital team can have a concurrent idea that will complement that work so that those ideas can match each other. And then the things that people are hearing at the doors and on the phones are also what they'll be hearing on Facebook, on Twitter, on blogs, etc. Digital cannot be a substitute for actual on-the-ground engagement. That's very important. One of my most statements that I dislike so deeply that I almost want to ban it in my presence is the idea of pushing out a message. Digital is to organize. It's a tool for organizing. It is not a tool for message control. It can be a tool that helps you amplify a message that you're already doing with your organizing efforts, but pushing out things on digital for digital's sake is, I think, a misused opportunity of one of our cheapest, most effective tools. And so you can't have digital smoke and mirrors. Ultimately, you're able to expose that people aren't doing real on-the-ground engagement. And this is really critical. If you're lucky enough to have separate people doing digital and communications, it's essential that those people collaborate together. They need to be able to talk to one another and share information. So once you do all that, once you invest all that time in creating a plan together and sharing your time and resources together, you want to make sure you can track that progress. So on the left is some field metrics that we have, really common organizing or membership metrics that we use in campaigns or political work. You want to talk about calls made, doors knocked, how many cards you collected, if you recruited volunteers, how many people signed up for a shift, maybe how many house parties you had, how many contacts you did. There's also digital metrics. It's very easy to tell if you're making an impact online. You can have some of those same metrics that you have in the field, like you can know how many people made calls through a click-to-call page or an online call tool. You can also know how many people RSVP'd for an event that you recruited for online via email or Facebook or Twitter. Or maybe you're trying to get people to become online hosts of on-the-ground events by sending out an email. You can also do that. You can also figure out how many new names your email list has acquired, how many unique visits. So that means the amount of times a single new person has visited a site. That doesn't include repeat viewers. Or the action rate on an email. So I hear a lot of folks talk about open and click-through rates, but ultimately the most important rate is your action rate. It's of the people that opened and then clicked, how many of them actually took the action you wanted them to take. And then also your social media engagement. Notice I didn't say likes or followers, I said engagement. So the people who are retweeting you, writing back to you, commenting on your Facebook wall, sharing your Facebook messages, liking your Facebook posts, commenting on your blogs. That's the kind of real metric that actually determines what sort of impact you're having. Accountability is really important, so you want to make sure that you're measuring the right things. And one of the ways that you can hold everyone accountable is integrating at your events and other actions. So it's like what you would always do for an event. Say you're going to have a press conference. If you have a press conference, you're going to do all the same things you usually do, but now it's more digital. So all of these options are things that you can add. You can have your speakers ask people to sign up for your SMS list, your text list. And if you don't have a text list, let's talk about how you can get one. You can you can have signs that ask people to follow you on Twitter or use a particular hashtag because you're live tweeting an event. You can ask for people's email on sign-up sheets and then enter that data later on to make sure that you can get more people on your email list. And you can help tell your own story by asking them to take pictures and video. And sometimes I have people say, well, we don't want to get spammy. We don't want to have people, we think it's important to keep the conversation high level. Well, you can have people like, say, the president of your union or your local go out front and at the end of their speech have an 888 number that anyone can call and ask them to make phone calls. And if you have 100 people at your rally and maybe 50% of them take action, you're talking about 50 phone calls in 1 hour into a congressional office. That's the kind of difference that people notice. And then you also want to make sure to report back. Ultimately, we have to tell our story, and also we have to keep showing people that they want to be part of our community. It's both a demonstration of our community, a way to be the own narrators of our story, and then also a way to demonstrate that we're taking action. So you want to make sure to report back to your supporters. You do that on the ground often. You might give an update at a meeting or in a newsletter. You might call people and tell them thank you or send thank you cards. You'll take pictures and post them, maybe in a bulletin board or something like that. You can also do that online. You can get on blog and social and email and video and ask questions, and tell people the story of what you did. And it allows you to celebrate your successes and also potentially sort of message why you weren't as successful and how the fight needs to continue. And then notice here is where I include the media. Notice I didn't include necessarily mentions of media in other places. Media can be a really powerful tool for talking about the work that you're doing. You can do it beforehand as a way to tease people about the work that you're doing, and after as a way to report back about the work you did. But again, it's not a substitute for doing that work. And then you want to make sure to make another ask. You want to make it online and on the ground. When they're at that rally, you want to ask them to do something else. After they got the email and you report back about the rally, you want to ask them again to do something. You want to always be asking people. The analogy that I can make is that farmers often will let crops, they'll do like crop rotation, and they'll let a particular field lie fallow for a season so that the dirt and land can re-enrich itself. I'm a city girl, I'm sorry, I don't know what you call things at the farm. And digital and volunteers are not a crop that you can let lie fallow. In fact, when you do that, they wither and die. They need to be watered constantly by asking them all the time. And you want to make sure those asks are complementary or maybe even the same, both online and on the ground. As we go through this process, you may be surprised. This may be even something that makes you uncomfortable. You, I hate to break it to you, may have to change. You might have to do things differently than you've been doing personally. Maybe you're not sharing information with other departments, or maybe you haven't thought about including digital stuff. That's been something you thought about afterwards. You're busy and you have lots of other duties, and so you're not totally certain how to get everything done. I understand that, but I think what you'll see is that being an integrated organizer can actually help you do all those things better, because integrated organizers think strategically. They make sure that everybody has an equal seat at the table so that the best decision makers can come together and make a choice, not just one person making a decision for everybody else without thinking about the impact of that decision on other people's work. They make decisions, but in their purview. They're not trying to make decisions for other people because they know that those colleagues got it covered. And they share information. They don't hoard that information and then have people find out about it afterwards. They collaborate together so that they can come to mutual decisions together that are probably, it's true that of the old adage that two heads are better than one. And they engage in rapid response, and I mean actually rapid, which is like within hours, because they allow that online piece to have the space that it needs to be able to respond immediately when a crisis or opportunity hits. And they evaluate, and this is really clear. They debrief with other people after an event or action to determine how it went, how it could have gone better, ways that they might not have been able to be the best, and how they can be the best other times. They think about whether or not their tactics are having an impact, and if they're really working, and if they're not working, they change them. So they continually evaluate themselves, their campaign, their numbers, their team, internally as a group and externally with other actors. And this is a really important note about terminology. I find often that when field or organizing or political or campaigns or membership folks talk to online people, they don't always know what the tools or language to use. That's okay. It's okay not to know something. You should ask questions. And similarly, online folks may not always understand, or communications folks may not always understand how field folks work. They should ask questions too. I think both of those groups of people really want to share their knowledge because everyone loves being an expert and being asked their opinion. And I think all of us will really benefit from talking through those things. It'll help us realize maybe places where it's not making sense because of how our campaign is working on the ground, or on the flip side, how that online work is or is not complementing that, the work on the ground. And so being able to say things the right way is both a sign of respect and a sign of being open to hearing those folks' opinions. Okay, so now we're going to get into our Choose Your Own Adventure piece. And we right now are going to have a campaign. I want to take a note and say that our campaign is a fun campaign. And that's just because I think it's more fun on trainings like this to play make-believe a little bit. But this, the methodology and the strategy that we'll use to make these decisions are rooted in the same kind of strategy and methodology you can use for really serious campaigns. Even though we're using Oreo, you can apply decision-making to the work that you guys are doing. And I want to be clear that this is certainly not like a lack of respect for the work that we do, just a way to kind of liven things up and keep it fun. So our campaign is to make Oreo the nation's official snack food. Because working families support Oreo, the union-made community cookie. It's opposed by McDonald's and other giant fast food corporations who are throwing millions of dollars because they want to be America's official snack food. They want French fries to be America's official snack food. And we want to say that we won't accept anything less in our campaign than full inclusion for every variety of Oreo as the nation's snack food. So let's define our goals in this campaign. So this is where you guys are going to actually make decisions in this campaign. So note that there is an A and a B. If you support A, you should raise your hand.
Hold on. There's a couple people who have their hands raised. So
yeah.
if they can hit the raise. If you have your hand raised right now, there's a button at the top left. If you can click that off, there's two people that have their hands raised. We just want to make sure we get an accurate count.
So unraise your hand. So let's go over really quick how to raise and raise our hand. We raise our hand by clicking on the button. We unraise our hand by re-clicking on it. 2 clicks is unraised hand. All right. So if you support A, raise your hand. Do you want to pass legislation to get Congress to name Oreo the official cookie? If you support A, raise your hand. Great. All right. So we're letting folks take their time. If they support A, they're raising their hand. We support passing legislation to get Congress to name Oreo the nation's official cookie.
Okay.
All right, great.
There's still people that, if they can click off.
And now you want to click off. Just click raise hand again to unraise your hand. All right, now B, our option, get President Obama to pass an executive order recognizing Oreo as the official cookie. If you support B, you want to raise your hand. And remember,
Keep them
raised. Keep them raised. Keep those hands raised. If you support B, keep those hands raised. I want to remember to think about which one will create lasting change, which one has real urgency, which one will make a real difference. Do we have a chance at winning as you make your choices? All right, so our winner here was A by like 10. Folks believe that A is a more strategic goal to pass legislation to get Congress to name Oreo the official cookie. That is correct. I agree with that. A will allow us to have unending legislation because Congress would have to pass a new law to change it. That takes a long time. If President Obama passes an executive order, that is a fast way to get what we want, but it can be immediately overturned by the next president. Awesome job, guys. Okay, so now let's decide our actions. So we have actions 1, 2, and 3, and we want to make sure to think about which one has real urgency, which one will get us to the goal that we have, which I want to remind everyone again is passing legislation to get Congress to name Oreo the official cookie. Which one gets at our targets? So in this case, Congress, the folks that we're trying to persuade here. So we have option 1, hold X house parties to consume X cookies in all 50 states. So you can put whatever number you want in there, but make believe there. 2, deliver X number of cookies to a certain number of key congressional targets. Or 3, generate X number of calls to X key congressional targets. All right, if you pick 1, if you think holding house parties for folks to eat cookies is the most strategic choice, raise your hand if you pick 1. Raise that hand if you pick 1. All right, now unraise your hand if 1 is not for you. And then number 2, you want to deliver X number of cookies to key congressional targets. If you think that by delivering cookies to Congress, that's the more strategic option, raise your hand if you pick 2. Great. And if you think 3 is the most strategic way to take action to generate X number of calls to Congress, pick 3. All right. So, whoa, 3 run by an overwhelming margin. Only a couple of people picked 1 and 2. 3 folks. So 3 was our winner. Most folks thought that generating calls to Congress was the best way. So here's what I'm going to say. One thing about this is I'm not trying to tell people what is the best way to do things. Maybe for your particular campaign, making calls to Congress isn't the best way. Remember in math class when they would tell you how to solve an equation, and then some people in the class would find a different way to solve the equation. There's always that one person who had like a way no one else could understand to solve the equation, but all of them ultimately solve the equation. Organizing is sort of like that. You can kind of put the equation in a bunch of different ways. So actually, all of these things are actions that we can take, and all of them would have some kind of reasonable success. In my case, I actually think that number 2 is the right answer. I think delivering cookies to Congress is the right answer because I think the more cookies members of Congress eat, the more I think they will be inclined to make Oreo the official cookie. I think in this case, because Oreo is a special product in a special campaign action, calls might not be as effective because cookies taste good. So that can be a pretty persuasive argument. If anyone wants to, who picked 1 or 2, can you send a note to the chat can you tell us why you picked that by sending a note? I'd love to hear why you guys thought 1 or 2 was the best option. Nobody? Anybody? Don't be shy.
Okay. So,
all right.
Because you make calls at a house party.
Okay, so someone said the reason they picked number 1 is because you make calls at a house party, which is true. A house party enables you to be in the community and get volunteers and make calls. So it's like a lot of bang for your buck.
Someone said number 2. They picked number 2 because
Someone said they picked number 2 because they think it has potential for media coverage, which is a really good point. I think if you delivered a lot of cookies to Congress, people would write about it.
because you're able to get the key folks to support, then they will convince others to vote for approval.
Someone said if you deliver cookies to key members of Congress, they'll convince other members of Congress to support. Totally right. Tell me, those of you who picked number 3, why did you pick number 3? You can send a note and let us know why you picked number 3.
Because
people aren't saying, okay, well, I mean, my guess is that most of you have done actions before, and people tell you all the time that calls make a difference, that members of Congress care about how many calls they make. That's the only thing that will persuade them or change them, and that they have a formed opinion. And so generating calls is the fastest and most impactful way to get folks to do that. So again, someone says,
shows constituent support.
Someone said it shows constituent support. That's a really good point. Members of Congress are really interested when local people are sharing their opinions. All right, so we're going to move on. So again, you could pick number 1, number 2, or number 3. It's my training, so I get to pick which one I think is the most strategic. I think it's number 2. So we're going to go with number 2. But 3 is just as good of an option potentially, depending on what your goals are. So you want to plug in digital. So these are 4 different options that you can use to plug in digital into your on-the-ground work. You could email supporters a weekly newsletter about the campaign. You could share pro-Oreo articles on social media. You could make a microsite about why Oreo is such an awesome cookie. You could place pro-Oreo online ads on political news sites. Do folks have, if you support a specific one, I want you all to raise your hand. So if you support one, raise your hand. I'm going to go fast this time. So if you support one, raise your hand. Great. Unraise your hand if you supported number 1. If you support number 2, raise your hand. All right, unraise our hand if you support number 2. If you support number 3, raise your hand. And if you support number 4, raise your hand. Unraise our hand if you support number 3. If you support 4, raise your hand. All right. So in this case, number 2 won, but not by much. They think that sharing pro-Oreo articles on social media is the best. Most people think that. And actually, a lot of people didn't vote in this case. And I'm glad, I'm hoping that the reason that you didn't vote is because those are all pretty bad ways. None of those are integrated into our field campaign strategy. Our field campaign strategy's goal is to deliver X number of cookies to key congressional targets. So let's talk a little bit about why 1, 2, 3, and 4 are not that great in this case. So these are all perfectly fine things to do generally, but in the case of our campaign, they're not that strategic, which is really important. And if perhaps the communications people who were making these decisions had talked to the field people about that, we might not have had this problem. So emailing supporters a weekly newsletter. In this case, you're trying to persuade Congress. Emailing supporters a newsletter does not in any way persuade Congress. We can share pro-Oreo articles on social media. True, that is a good way, but probably doesn't further, again, our goal of delivering cookies to Congress. We can make a microsite about why Oreo is awesome. We could, and if that microsite had some kind of click to call Congress or a click to sign a petition or like click to donate to buy cookies for Congress, maybe I would be in support of that. You could also place pro-Oreo online ads on political news sites. But again, that is really not that strategic because I doubt members of Congress are clicking around on political news sites just looking at ads. So all of those are not that great of options. Let's try again. Let's plug in digital this time with some different actions. What if we ask supporters to sign a petition to Congress? Or place online ads that link to a click-to-call page? or get supporters to tweet at members of Congress, or host a tweet chat about Oreo. If you support number 1, raise your hand. If you support number 2, raise your hand. If you support number 3, raise your hand. And if you support number 4, raise your hand. All right. So number 3 was the winner, and it was very close to number 2. A lot of folks thought number 2 was good, and then 1 and 4, not that many people agreed with. I think that all of these are actually pretty mediocre. None of them actually get at our goal, which is deliver X number of cookies to key congressional targets. I want to note that if our goal was to generate calls, number 2 would be a great option. If our goal was to generate calls, number 1 might also be a good option because we could ask people to sign a petition, and then their next ask could be make calls. But none of these really get at our main thing, which is that we want to deliver cookies to Congress. So again, you can land in a couple of different places on this, and so it depends on what your goal is. All of the actions that we talked about, both in this and this, are possible digital actions that you can take. So they're certainly not bad actions, but I don't think they're the most strategic. So now let's think about some real strategic options. Let's plug in. Yep.
There's a question.
Someone has a question.
Yeah. Isn't our goal to make Oreo the national cookie? Then once we deliver, force this through.
Okay, so someone says, isn't our goal to make Oreo the national cookie? If we deliver, don't we need supporters to force the bill through? In the political climate in which there is an actual bill for Oreo to be a national cookie, I'm not sure I know if we need supporters to force it through. It's true that sometimes you do need folks to really give support to keep senators or representatives from wavering on votes that they may have already promised. So yes, I totally agree with that. In this case, the analysis that we did on this campaign was the best way to make Oreo the national cookie is to deliver cookies to members of Congress. And this is really key. If we tried that and it wasn't working, we should change it. If we tried that and had other asks, we want to be sure to stay focused on our goals. A lot of times in campaigns, you'll get a bunch of different asks from allies and other folks who are also part of the fight. Maybe someone's trying to make the Keebler elf, right, the national mascot. That is sort of related to what's going on with the Oreo. They're both cookies. We're sort of in the cookie family, but we have to keep focused on our goal. And our goal is to get Oreo to be the national cookie, and we think the best way to do that is to deliver cookies to Congress. So I really appreciate that question. And again, I want to reiterate that people can come to different conclusions about this, so I'm really glad you pointed out that important thing. So let's talk about plugging in digital. So we have 3 options here. 1, ask supporters to buy Oreo cookies that we'll deliver to Congress by signing their name on a petition. So if a supporter signs their name, that counts for a cookie. We'll deliver X number of cookies, i.e. X number of names to Congress. 2, ask supporters to sign up for a pro-Oreo Lobby Day webinars. We're going to train people on what to do for their webinars, and then they'll go to their offices to lobby folks, maybe with cookies. 3, we're asked supporters to turn out for pro-Oreo rallies outside congressional offices. All right, what do we think? Number 1, raise a hand.
So someone is asking if number 1 is like sending a virtual Oreo.
Is number 1 like sending a virtual Oreo? Yeah, I think actually this is like actually sending an Oreo, right? If we get this many names, we can think of it like a 1-to-1. One name equals 1 cookie, or maybe 1 to 10. One name equals 10 cookies. So it will actually result in people delivering cookies. Number 2, if you support number 2, raise your hand. And if you support number 3, raise your hand. All right, and 1 was the winner, which I agree is the most strategic use of our resources. So then you want to integrate your actions. So again, it's actually the slide that I had before. In this case, we have a lot of ways that we can integrate our actions. We can ask people to text to our SMS number if they support it, and that could also be like delivering a cookie. We could ask people to, for every follower or like that we get on Facebook, we'll deliver some cookies. We could be at an event where we eat cookies and we get and we collect people's names and then follow up with them and ask them to sign the petition so that we can deliver more cookies. We can take video of labor leaders asking people to sign up so that we can deliver more cookies, right? All of these ways can allow us to get back to our goal, which is delivering those cookies. That is so there's sort of like a question about goal and strategy and tactics. Those are different things. Our goal is that we want a national cookie law. Our strategy is that we're going to deliver cookies. Then our tactic is what are we working on or deciding right now. So sometimes in the legislative process, things are long, right? Maybe we're first going to pass our first way is to pass a law in Missouri about the cookie, and then that'll like give us precedent to pass it in other states, and that'll give us precedent to pass it on the federal level. So we might apply different tactics around that time, but doesn't change our goal of national cookie. Thanks for that clarification. And then there's reporting back. So we want to make sure to report back. We could send a newsletter to labor leaders about the success of our actions. We could send out a press release to local media about the success of our actions, or we can use blogs and social media to tell the story of our actions. So if you support 1, raise that hand. If you support 2, raise that hand. And if you support 3, raise your hand. If you support 1, raise your hand. All right. So, okay. So 3 was the winner by far, but we had people who said all of them. So I agree that all of them can be a very helpful way to amplify your efforts. And if you have the capacity and resources, doing all of those things will be helpful. If you can only have time for 1, which I know is what a lot of people have, then I say 3 is the best option. And here's why. When you pick 3, you have the ability to amplify 1 and 2. The things that you report in that newsletter or in the press release are in 3, and the chances that more people will see them are high. A lot of times, reporters won't even open up a press release if you don't already have a relationship with them. And even if you do have a relationship with them, they might not open it. And then telling your story is at the whim of someone else. And we have the tools that we need to tell our own stories, so we don't need we don't need to be at the mercy of reporters. And if we send a newsletter to labor leaders, we're getting a really small portion of folks. We can talk to a lot of other people. And I see this happen a lot. It's interesting because 1 was the option that people picked the least. But I find often when people are actually engaging in campaigns, they're doing 1 most of the time. So sometimes we do have to do actions that we don't want to do, maybe because our leadership or other folks want us to do that. But again, really applying this sort of strategic litmus test feels important. Yes, thank you. Someone pointed out that most reporters on social media, which is true. You can pitch reporters over Twitter. I have had success doing it. I know folks who have had success doing it. I know organizations whose entire media strategy is pitching reporters on Twitter. So yes, absolutely. So then we think about what's next. So what do we want to ask people to do next? Do we want to ask them to work on a campaign to get Lay's to be the official chip? Do we want to ask them to recruit a friend to buy cookies on our petition? Do we want to ask them to share the campaign with their friends on Facebook? We're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to pick this one. I think that each of these have potential options. One is maybe you need to run a lot of campaigns at the same time, and so you need people who might be interested to be running multiple campaigns. That's possible.
Someone asked, they want to know in the context of whether or not we were successful.
So this is someone asked if we were successful. This is just our next ask. So we haven't because we're still asking people. Otherwise, we would have won. So then we're going to ask them to recruit a friend or buy cookies on our petition. That seems smart because the next thing we're asking people to do is to recruit friends. That'll bring more people in. We'll get more people to sign the petition, thus deliver more cookies. Or we can ask them to share the campaign with their friends on Facebook, which is good. That might also help get more friends in who are interested in what we have to do if they see it on their Facebook wall that their friends shared it. In this case, I think 2 is the most strategic option because it allows us to get more names on the petition to buy more cookies, and buying more cookies to be able to deliver to Congress is the most important thing. All right, so if you have questions, now it's time to ask them. You just want to send a note, and it certainly doesn't have to be about Oreo cookies. It could be about digital integration or anything else I said today. Yes, it is. So just send a note if you have a question.
Jeremy asked, can everyone on this training get some free Oreos?
Jeremy asked if everyone can get free Oreos. I certainly wish they could because, as I said, they're an excellent union-made cookie. Unfortunately, I do not have a budget for Oreos. But I bet some of you have vending machines, and you can go get them easily.
SMS, what does that stand for?
Yeah, thank you. Someone asked, you mentioned SMS. What does that stand for? SMS stands for, I think it's like Standard Messaging Service. It means text. It's text messages. SMS is text. And we, I believe, have a text training coming soon. So go to go to AFL-CIO.org/digital trainings. I believe in the advanced section is there's an SMS training. No questions? No questions? I just don't believe that.
Yeah, the text is, someone just said it's on
August 20th. Someone just said the SMS training is on August 20th. Awesome, thank you. No other questions. Okay. We'll stay on for just a few minutes in case folks have questions that they haven't asked yet, but otherwise we're done. You can email me at jmorales@aflcio.org. I'm happy to answer questions for folks. You can also tweet at me at Jess, Livmo, Jess Livmo. Thank you so much for joining our presentation. I highly encourage you to keep signing up for those 1U digital trainings. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciated it. See you later, everybody.